ITN, the ITV News at 10 with Trevor McDonald.
Good evening. American and British forces have begun attacking the Taliban in Afghanistan tonight in a wave of military strikes aimed at crippling their air defenses and wiping out their military aircraft. The attacks began just before 5:30 this evening, 9:30 in Kabul, when 50 cruise missiles were launched from submarines and ships in the Arabian Sea, supported by what's been described as the most sophisticated bombers and strike aircraft in the American arsenal. Their targets: Taliban buildings in the capital Kabul and Taliban facilities in Jalalabad and Kandahar, where a military base is reported to have been destroyed. Tony Blair called it a moment of utmost gravity for the world. In Washington, President Bush said the Allies were supported in their action by an international coalition. The strikes prompted an immediate response from the man accused of provoking them, Osama bin Laden. He said the Allies would never again feel safe or secure. Tom Bradby has the latest.
The Prime Minister said that British missile-firing submarines had been used tonight, but that British pilots would join their American colleagues in the air over Afghanistan.
This, of course, is a moment of the utmost gravity for the world. None of the leaders involved in this action want war. None of our nations want it. We are a peaceful people. But we know that sometimes, to safeguard peace, we have to fight. Britain has learnt that lesson many times before in our history. We only do it if the cause is just, but this cause is just.
Mr. Blair said they had acted with deliberation.
This military plan has been put together, mindful of our determination to do all we humanly can to avoid civilian casualties. I cannot disclose, obviously, how long this action will last, but we will act with reason and resolve. We have set the objectives to eradicate Osama bin Laden's network of terror and to take action against the Taliban regime that is sponsoring him.
Mr. Blair paid tribute to President Bush, who warned the American people in his address to prepare for a long haul.
Senior Taliban officials in Pakistan have called the strikes on Afghan cities acts of terrorism, and they've said it will only unify the people. It was also added that Osama bin Laden and the Taliban leader Mullah Omar have both survived the initial air and missile assaults.
A few moments ago, I spoke to our correspondent Julian Manyon, who is on the front line of the conflict inside Afghanistan, about 20 miles from Kabul. He told me what he had seen and heard of the military strikes tonight.
Well, I'm on a mountainside called Top Daraa, which is about 20 miles from Kabul and is right behind the front where the Northern Alliance, whose forces I'm with, have been battling the Taliban. And what's taken place tonight is a very dramatic scene where in the distance, coming from Kabul, have been the sounds every so often, intermittently, of very heavy explosions. And a short time ago, for example, we also saw anti-aircraft fire rising over Kabul, though we have no idea what the target was, or indeed if there was one.
Julian, can you give us any idea of the targets which might have been hit tonight?
Well, so far, the only information we have comes from the Northern Alliance. And what they're telling us is that in Kabul, for example, the airport has apparently been heavily hit. This is hardly a surprise, because much of the Taliban's rather small and dilapidated air force was based there, shall we say. We understand from the Northern Alliance that the airport has been hit and a number of planes destroyed. And we also understand that in the Kabul area, several ministries, Taliban ministries, have also been hit and destroyed. The Northern Alliance also states that the cities of Kandahar, which is, of course, the headquarters and point of origin of the Taliban movement, has been struck, though we don't know what was hit there, and also targets around Jalalabad to the east have been hit. And Jalalabad is significant in that it is claimed that a number of training camps loyal to Osama bin Laden are in that area, and one must assume they have been among the targets hit. Another city which is said to have been hit is Mazar-e-Sharif, a very strategic area in the north next to Uzbekistan. But I stress that all these are claims from the Northern Alliance. We don't have confirmation yet.
Julian Manyon, thank you. Bill Neely is just across the Afghan border in Pakistan. Bill, what's the reaction in Pakistan tonight? Because it's been confirmed pretty publicly now that Pakistani airspace has been used.
Yes, that's right, although the key reaction here tonight is from the Taliban. Its only foreign ambassador speaking on behalf of the regime. From him, words tonight of condemnation and of defiance. He called the attacks brutal, horrendous, and said they were as bad a terrorist attack as anything the world had seen. America, he said, would never achieve its goals. Included in that, of course, is the capture of Osama bin Laden. I think significantly, Trevor, he is trying to portray these attacks as an attack on Islam. I think this is the Taliban tactic to try to unite the Muslim world against Britain and against America by portraying this as some kind of religious war. The other thing that's noteworthy is the Taliban are claiming they have shot down a plane over southern Afghanistan. We have no confirmation of that from here.
Bill, what's the latest on Yvonne Ridley, the British journalist who's been held hostage in Afghanistan?
Well, I understood that she was released from jail in Kabul today, but was still in the custody of the Taliban. Now, she was due to be handed over at the border, well, actually in about 12 hours' time, but there must be serious doubts now about that. These attacks tonight, exactly what her family hoped would not happen.
And just underscoring, Bill, Pakistan crucial to all this because they're also providing intelligence, aren't they?
Absolutely crucial. Airspace used, as you said. They had shared intelligence with the United States, especially about the training camps that they know a lot about. And indeed, those training camps, it appears, were targeted. Pakistan is now braced for a backlash, a possible backlash from its own militants. There are police out on the streets tonight, so we will see what happens tomorrow. One other point, evidence tonight of desertions from the Taliban ranks. One defecting Taliban senior commander predicting that the Taliban regime will fall and will fall soon.
Bill Neely in Pakistan, thank you. Welcome back to this special ITV News at 10. We're on the air tonight to report the beginning of military strikes launched by Britain and America against the Taliban regime in Afghanistan. In Washington, American Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld said the first wave was aimed at knocking out Taliban air defenses, and he hinted that the attacks could go on for some time. But he also said the overall aim of defeating terrorism was much broader than that. Our Washington correspondent James Mates reports.
Well, the Pentagon is giving almost nothing away. They're acutely aware that signaling their intentions in any way can only help the Taliban and Osama bin Laden's Al Qaeda network. Indeed, very, very few indications about today's attacks. Most unusual here. All they're saying is that the action is going to be continuous, that they're going to use all available forces at their command, and that they're going to fight this on all fronts. The only firm date we're getting in any way is November the 17th, the beginning of the Muslim holy month of Ramadan. There are pretty good indications here that the US does not intend to be attacking targets in Afghanistan during that holy month for fear of the effect that would have on the Muslim world.
James, we've been hearing reports that security has been tightened around Washington. What can you tell us about that?
Well, the most obvious example of that is that Vice President Dick Cheney has been taken out of the Capitol to an undisclosed destination. He is there, obviously, so that there is a continuous chain of command were, heaven forbid, anything to happen to President Bush. Greatly stepped up security here in the Capitol, even more so, I think, in New York, where, for obvious reasons, they're extremely nervous. You know, I think there's not just a fear of retaliation while this goes on. There's almost an expectation that there's going to be some sort of terrorist retaliation during this period.
James, give us a feel of how ordinary Americans are reacting to this news today.
Well, there's a great upsurge in patriotism. The American football games and a Soccer World Cup qualifier went on today with huge cheers of USA and singing of the national anthem in the crowd, but intense nervousness as well. They really don't know how this is going to develop.
James Mates, thank you. From Washington, let's go to our political editor now in Downing Street, John Sargeant. John, Tony Blair's been visible throughout this. How closely has Britain been involved in the planning of the details of what's gone on here?
Well, extremely closely. From the moment the attack happened, obviously the intelligence agencies on both sides of the Atlantic combined, but then the military planners got involved, and when Mr. Blair went to Washington a fortnight ago, he went with top British military planners to go through some of the options. Last Wednesday, the Americans decided exactly what the plan would be, and they put their request formally to the British side, and it was here in Downing Street the Defence Secretary Geoff Hoon and the Attorney General were involved when Mr. Blair formally authorised the use of British forces. The only thing that was still left open was exactly when the attacks would start, and those were conveyed, that information was conveyed to Mr. Blair by President Bush in a phone call last night when Mr. Blair got back from his diplomatic moves.
Do we have any idea how long this military campaign will last and the extent to which British forces will continue to be involved, or will be involved anyway?
Well, we don't know how long. Obviously, we've heard the words of President Bush talking about patience, and Mr. Blair talking about we will not let up until all our objectives have been met in full. Now, those objectives, the stated ones, are quite short. That's eradicating the terrorist network. But what we've also had in recent days is the firm indication that the Taliban regime will have to be removed and that the opium trade will have to be stopped. That could take some time.
John Sargeant, thank you. Let's go back now to the attacks in Afghanistan, and I'm joined by diplomatic editor Robert Moore, who's in the studio. Robert, is there anything you can tell us about the intensity of these attacks? What does that suggest?
Well, I think there are some very powerful clues out tonight that this will be a sustained campaign, and the air assault we're seeing at the moment is just the beginning. As the Pentagon has said tonight, they are just trying to set the conditions for further military action. I think the next phase is going to be intelligence-driven, it's going to be invisible and secret, almost certainly involving special forces being deployed on the ground. But as Donald Rumsfeld has said, it's going to involve all the instruments of American power.
Now, the Americans are going out of their way in an extraordinary fashion to say this is not just a military campaign by talking about the fact that they're also dropping food. I mean, food and missiles.
That's absolutely right. I mean, it's a multifaceted campaign the Pentagon is making clear, not just military, but political. They're going to try and support anti-Taliban groups, the Northern Alliance and other tribal groups. There's going to be a diplomatic push as well to try and ensure the coalition is tonight still intact. And you're right, in addition to that, there's this humanitarian effort to make sure up to 4 million people who are still vulnerable as winter approaches are provided with food, medicine and other humanitarian aid. So there is this extraordinary image tonight of flights in the air over Afghanistan, dropping both bombs and food parcels.
And it's all designed to make sure that this is not against Islam, as Osama bin Laden would like to have us believe.
That is absolutely key to the rhetoric and to the policies, both in Washington and in London, to make sure Osama bin Laden does not win the campaign and make this a Christian versus Islam battle.
Robert Moore, thank you. And that's all from this special edition of the ITV News at 10. We'll have the latest on the strikes against Afghanistan throughout the night here on ITV. But from now, from everyone here, goodbye.